Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video is our biggest one yet, as we are going to be showing you how to build the all-new Demon 3.0 electric skateboard kit. This electric skateboard kit is sold by us on our online store, propulsionboards.com, and it's the latest iteration of our flagship Demon series board that's taken everything we've learned in the last 3 years with the Demon 2.0 to create what we think is the best DIY electric skateboard kit. The Demon 3.0 has a top speed of 35 miles an hour on the stock setup, with a range of over 30 miles and a hill climbing ability that will literally climb up any hill thrown at the board. The best part about this kit is that all of the components and tools required to build this board are included in the kit. This means that anyone can build this high quality electric skateboard in just a couple of hours. Everything is plug and play and has been made super easy and user friendly to build. While the Demon 3.0 is intended to be a kit, we also have this product available as a complete electric skateboard that ships to you ready to ride right out of the box. So without further ado, let's get into how to assemble and build this board. The first step in building the Demon 3.0 is to assemble the drivetrain of the board. The Demon 3.0 uses our all-new redesigned motor mount that is precision CNC machined from aerospace-grade 7075 T6 aluminum. The mounts have been optimized to be sleeker and stronger than ever. The material upgrade to 7075 over 6061 results in a motor mount that's twice as strong as those used on the Demon 2.0. The motors used on this board are the 6374 170 kV battle-hardened motors from FlipSky. They have a maximum power output of 3,500 watts for combined maximum power output on the board of 7,000 watts. The motors feature a D-shaped shaft, custom braided cable sleeving, 4mm bullet connectors, and already VESC compatible sensor wires. The stock Demon 3.0 setup utilizes 170 kV motors, which result in more torque at the expense of top speed. There will also be an option to purchase the board with 190 kV motors instead if preferred. The motor pulleys are 15-tooth, 15mm wide HTD5 D-shaped motor pulleys. These motor pulleys have a much tighter tolerance than before, resulting in a much more snug fit over the shaft of the motor. The result is a motor pulley that is much less likely to come loose after a long time use of the board. The first step in the assembly of the drivetrain is to install the motor pulley onto the shaft of the motor. To do this, the small set screws are required. Begin by threading the set screw into the thread on the side of the motor pulley a couple of turns. Then press the motor pulley over the shaft of the motor until it sits flush with the top of the shaft of the motor. This can be a little bit tricky and take a little bit of force, as the motor pulley sits really snugly on the shaft of the motor. We highly recommend using red or blue Loctite on the set screw to avoid the set screw coming loose due to road vibrations later down the line. Loctite is not included with this kit, but it's a good thing to have for routine board maintenance later down the line. The set screw can be fastened down all the way until making contact with the motor shaft using the included 1.5mm Allen key. The next step is to mount the motors to the motor mounts. This is done using the 8 M4 cap head bolts, 4 go to each motor. The slots on the motor mount align with the threads tapped in the front of the motor. The optimal orientation of the motor is so that the phase wires are angled as shown right here. The cap head bolts can then be used to secure the motor to the motor mount using a 3mm Allen key. This process is then repeated with the phase wire orientation mirrored on the second motor so that the board drivetrain is symmetrical. The Demon 3.0 is available with 2 different truck variants, our classic DKP and our new split angle DKP trucks. Each of these trucks has their benefits and drawbacks, so the choice is dependent on what the right board for you looks like. The DKP truck offers a more carvy and surf life feeling to the board, while the TKP truck offers a little bit more stability at higher speed. In this video, we will be building the board with the TKP trucks, but the build process for the board with the DKP trucks is nearly identical. Both trucks use 300mm wide axles with a 10mm to 8mm step down pattern that is common across a lot of other DKP and TKP truck options on the market. This means that the Demon 3.0 is compatible with all of the aftermarket pulleys and wheels from these other brands. The trucks also feature a built-in motor mount system on the rear hanger for a simple, easy, and ultra-reliable drivetrain mounting system. The next step of assembly requires 6 M5 cap head bolts and 6 M5 nuts. This hardware is used to mount the motor mounts to the trucks. First, slide the mounts over the rear hanger and align the 3 holes on the truck mount with the 3 holes on the motor mount plate. The bolts and nuts can then be used to clamp the motor mount to the motor mount on the truck. To do this, the 4mm Allen key is used to rotate the bolt, and the wrench provided in the kit holds the nut. This is one of the more tedious processes of the build when using the tools provided in the kit. If you have a drill or driver with a 4mm bit, this process is much easier. The mounting process is then repeated for the other motor mount. The Demon 3.0 uses these all-new custom-made glass-filled nylon injection molded wheel pulleys. They are 38 teeth, 15mm wide HTD5 Kegel press fit wheel pulleys with a 10mm custom inner diameter bearing pre-installed. The belts used on this build are 290mm, 15mm wide, standard HTD5 timing belts. For the next step of assembly, make sure that the motors are not fully bolted to the motor mount and can slide along these slots. First, slide the belt over the motor pulley and the hanger of the rear truck, and then slide the wheel pulley onto the rear axle and rotate the pulley until the belt fully aligns between the motor pulley and the wheel pulley. The belt tension can then be set by using 2 fingers to pull the motor back until the belt reaches the optimal tension. Our standard is to have the belts as loose as possible without any slippage of the belt under hard braking. Achieving this may take some tinkering as the board is ridden. The belt covers used on the Demon 3.0 are custom made to fit the new motor mounts on the board. For the first batch of boards, they will be 3D printed from PETG, though we hope to eventually have them be injection molded. To secure the belt covers to the motor mounts, use the 4 M4x10mm cap head bolts. 2 will go into each belt cover. The belt cover sits around the outside of the motor mount, which protects the mount from getting scraped, which is a huge upgrade from the previous belt cover design. The 2 cap head bolts then screw into the threads that are tapped into the face of the motor mounts. At this point, the drivetrain is finished. As a side note, just the drivetrain is available as a standalone project called the Complete Mechanical Kit, which can also be found on propulsionboards.com. There will be a link to this in the description below as well. The next step in the build is to assemble the electronics into the enclosure electronics assembly. The first part is the ESC, and the ESC that's currently being used for the first batch of the Demon 3.0 kits is the Stormcore 60D. This VESC-based ESC was once one of the most reliable and popular ESCs in the DIY electric skateboard community. The phase wires on the ESC are the 4mm bullet connectors, and the battery input is an XT90. For a full review of the Stormcore 60D, check out the video in the top right corner right here. For future versions of the Demon 3.0, the DV6 Pro will be the VESC-based ESC used. The DV6 Pro has become an extremely popular VESC-based ESC for many DIY builders and brands alike, boasting fantastic specs and a great performance. The battery used on the Demon 3.0 kit is a 12S4P made from premium grade Molicel P42A 21700 cells. This battery is 706 watt-hours, which is over 33% larger than the Demon 2.0 battery. The pack is manufactured here in the USA by Duck Battery Systems. Duck uses the highest quality materials for their packs, and they utilize a PCB design for the battery. The pack is flex tolerant so that the pack can flex slightly with the enclosure and deck. The battery uses a Dali BMS, which is bypassed for discharge, and the charge port is fused. The charge port is a 2.1mm DC barrel jack, which is removable for installation via an XT30 connector. The BMS will likely come detached from the battery when shipped in the kit. To attach the BMS, first plug in the JST cable from the battery into the BMS, then connect the black XT30 coming out of the battery into the black XT30 on the BMS. A huge new addition to the Demon 3.0 is the custom CNC heatsink machined from 6061 T6 aluminum. This heatsink mounts to the VESC-based ESC to keep it running as coolly and maintain a high performance on the board. The enclosure is another component filled with massive upgrades over the Demon 2.0. This enclosure has been designed from the ground up for perfect compatibility with all other Demon 3.0 components. The enclosure is vacuum formed from glossy 5mm thick ABS plastic and is thicker and more robust than ever. The new enclosure uses 22 M5 bolts to mount to the deck, which further reduces the risk of enclosure cracking. There are 2 channels pre-formed in the rear of the enclosure for easy routing of the motor phase wires into the enclosure. The rear section of the enclosure features a perfectly pre-cut hole for the CNC machined heatsink and pre-drilled power switch and charge port holes. The flange to bolt the enclosure to the deck now goes around the entire perimeter of the enclosures, and the holes are pre-drilled to perfectly match the pattern of the nut inserts already inside the deck. The holes are also counterbored for use with our new washers. The enclosure is also designed with ridges to allow for a semi-flexible design. To go along with the enclosure, we also have a new custom die-cut gasket made from EVA foam to sit between the enclosure and the deck. This gasket helps reduce road vibrations between the enclosure and the deck and also helps a little bit with weatherproofing the board. It has a peel-off adhesive backing so that it can be easily mounted to the underside of the deck. This gasket is a new component to the Demon series kits, which enhances the quality of the board and makes the build process easier than ever before. The first step in the enclosure electronics assembly is to mount the charge port and power switch to the enclosure walls. The charge port can be tricky to mount as the charge port nut's inner diameter is almost the same size as the XT30 connector's thickness. I find that the best way to remove the washer in order to thread the port through the hole in the enclosure is to rotate the washer along the connector slowly until it threads itself off of the XT30 connector. To secure the charge port to the wall of the enclosure, the same process just needs to be repeated in reverse. The power switch easily mounts into the pre-drilled hole in the enclosure and is secured using the nut that comes with the switch. The second step is to mount the heatsink to the enclosure. This is done using 4 M3 countersunk bolts and 4 M3 nuts. Keep the enclosure face down and lift the heatsink through the inside of the enclosure. The heatsink slots perfectly into the pre-cut hole, and then the 4 bolts pass through the outside holes of the enclosure and the holes in the heatsink. The enclosure can then be carefully flipped upside down, and the M3 nuts are used to fix the heatsink to the enclosure fully. To hold the battery in, there are 2 custom Velcro straps which stick to the inside of the enclosure and hug the battery into place. The 2 straps are fastened to the enclosure using the peel-off adhesive on the back of the central piece. 2 smaller pieces of Velcro can then be stuck to the central Velcro piece in the middle to prevent lateral movement of the battery. The battery can then be placed inside of the strap and on top of the small Velcro pieces so that they can adhere to the battery. The straps can then be fastened together to lock the battery in place. The combination of the strap and the small Velcro pieces prevents motion in all degrees of freedom, locking the battery in place. The BMS is also held into place with an additional small piece of Velcro. The next step is to mount the ESC to the heatsink inside the enclosure. This is done using the 4 M3 by 8mm cap head bolts. The easiest way to do this is to hold the enclosure on its side and pinch the storm core up against the heatsink on the inside of the enclosure. Then carefully maneuver the storm core until the tapped holes in the storm core case align with the holes in the heatsink. Once they line up, fasten the M3 cap head bolt using a 2.5mm Allen hex key. For the second bolt, rotate the storm core until the bolt holes align again. Once the first 2 bolts are in place, the rest are much easier as the holes are already lined up. The XT30 coming off the BMS can then connect up to the XT30 on the charge port, and then the power switch can be connected up to the 6-pin JST port on the back of the storm core. Next, the XT90 battery lead can be connected to the XT90 port on the inside of the storm core. The connector sits a little bit farther back than expected, so it's important to ensure that the battery is fully plugged into the ESC. At this point, the majority of the electronics enclosure assembly has been connected. The next step is to work on the final assembly of the board, which takes the deck, the enclosure assembly, and the drivetrain. One of the upgrades that we are most excited about in the Demon 3.0 is the all-new custom deck. This deck is 38.5 inches long and 10 inches wide at its widest point. It features a very subtle 10mm flat cave concave and a steep 15mm drop down. These 2 features allow for an extremely comfortable ride with the confidence to accelerate quickly. The deck is made from 8 layers of Canadian maple and 2 layers of bamboo, and the top of the deck features a laser-engraved Propulsion Boards logo with custom die-cut grip tape. The 22 M5 threaded nut inserts are made from stainless steel for extreme durability and are pre-installed in the deck for easy assembly. Every element from this deck, from the building phase to the riding phase, has been thoughtfully and meticulously calculated to facilitate the ultimate Demon 3.0 experience. The first step in the final assembly is to stick the gasket to the deck. My favorite way to do this is to use the bolts from the enclosure hardware to position the gasket into its final position. After installing the bolts surrounding the entire gasket into the threaded nut inserts, remove them one by one, peeling off the backing and sticking the gasket to the deck. This process is repeated around the entire perimeter until the gasket is fully stuck to the deck. The next step is to mount the trucks to the deck. The trucks can either be drop down or top mounted. Drop down will give a lower center of gravity and ride feel, while top mounting the trucks will provide a better clearance for the enclosure. With the TKP trucks, I tend to stick with top mounting. The kit comes with a custom CNC machined top mounting plate made from 6061 T6 aluminum. The deck hardware consists of 8 1.5 inch panhead bolts, 8 washers, and 8 nuts. First, align the top mount plate with the deck mounting holes and then insert the 4 panhead bolts. The trucks can then be aligned with the bolts protruding from the bottom of the deck. Next, add a washer and a nut to each bolt. Tighten each bolt and nut down using the included T-tool and Phillips head bit. The exact same process is repeated for the rear truck. With the trucks mounted, flip the entire board over so that the deck belly is facing up, and then place the enclosure upside down on the deck belly. To connect the motor phase wires to the ESC, first cross them over as they will uncross when the enclosure is flipped back over and mounted to the deck. Then simply press together the 3 motor phase wires to the ESC wires for each motor. Next, connect the respective sensor wires to the sensor wire ports on the front of the Storm core. At this point, the board can be programmed up using the VESC tool. Our latest tutorial on how to do this will be linked in the top right corner of the video here, as this changes as the tool is upgraded and the ESC changes. Once the board has been programmed, the next step is to install the receiver. The remote that comes stock with the Demon 3.0 is the VX2, which has long been our favorite remote. The remote has custom propulsion decals and ships with 2 sets of cables that come within the box. You'll need the cable with the larger 8-pin JST for use with the Stormcore ESC. The smaller end of the JST cable can then be plugged into the receiver, and the end with the larger JST connector is plugged into the UART port on the VESC-based ESC. The receiver is then stuck to the inside of the enclosure using a very small piece of Velcro. At this point, the board can be bench tested using the remote to ensure that everything is working properly. Once this has been confirmed, I like to add hot glue to all of the nuts that can rattle loose with time in the enclosure, including the heatsink nuts, the charge port nut, and the power switch nut. Hot glue is not included with this kit. The final step that I take on the inside of the enclosure is to use the provided heat shrink tubing to insulate the connections of the phase wires. Unplug the phase wires one at a time and slide over the heat shrink tubing to ensure that the order of the wires is maintained after programming. The heat shrink is an added layer of security to prevent any potential shorts between the phase wires. Once everything has been connected, programmed, and sealed up, flip over the enclosure, uncross the phase wires, and then carefully route them through the channels on the rear of the enclosure. The enclosure hardware on the Demon 3.0 is massively upgraded from the 2.0 with 22 M5 stainless steel countersunk bolts and blue-themed aluminum conical washers. The conical washers provide a great accent to the board and prevent rocks from knocking the enclosure hardware loose. First, insert the conical washers into the counterboard enclosure holes and then carefully bolt the enclosure to the board by hand using the 3mm Allen hex key. Make sure to progressively tighten the bolts, alternating sides around the enclosure until fully tightened. The holes should align perfectly between the enclosure and the deck, so if it becomes too difficult to screw the bolt in, try to loosen some of the bolts that are already installed. The wheels that will be used on the kit for now are the 105mm Mad wheels from Mad E-Skate. Mad E-Skate has been a longtime partner of propulsion boards, and their wheels are our favorite to ride on. They are ultra smooth and comfortable, providing a great riding experience. They're 102mm in diameter with a 65mm contact patch. The wheels feature a Kegel cord that snaps right into our wheel pulley. For a full review on these wheels, make sure to check out the video in the top right corner here. We only have limited quantities of these wheels remaining, so the first batch of kits will ship with the original wheels, but later kits will use the new mad wheels that are going to be released soon. The bearings used on the Demon 3.0 are ABEC 11 propulsion boards branded bearings with built-in spacers for extra easy assembly. To install the bearings, simply slide the bearing onto a truck axle and then press the truck into the wheel so that the bearing snaps into place. Repeat the exact same process to insert the second bearing into the wheel. The last step of assembly for the Demon 3.0 is to mount the wheels to the axles of the trucks. Keep one speed ring on the axle, then slide the wheel onto the axle. Add the second speed ring and then finish with the axle nut. Tighten the axle nut until the wheel is fully locked on and can no longer move along the axle. For the rear wheels, align the pegs on the Kegel wheel pulley with the holes in the wheel and simply press the wheel into place, and then finish with the axle nut as well. The last step is to peel the protective film off of the enclosure to reveal the pristine glossy finish. And just like that, the Demon 3.0 is finished, and this is what the finished product looks like. So there you guys have it. That's how you build the all-new Demon 3.0 electric skateboard kit. This board has a 35-mile-an-hour top speed, 30+ miles of range, and an unbelievable hill climbing ability. The Demon 3.0 is the culmination of everything that we've learned in the last 7 years building DIY electric skateboards, and in the last 3 years with the Demon 2.0. If you guys are interested in learning how to build an electric skateboard, the Demon 3.0 is the perfect way to get into the DIY community. All of the part compatibility guesswork has been taken out of the build process, and everything is plug and play, snapping together with relative ease. All of the board components shown in this video are included in the kit, and all of the mechanical tools required to build this board, such as the Allen keys, wrenches, and T-tool, are also included. The Demon 3.0 really is the best high-performance electric skateboard kit on the market right now, with premium, modular, high-performing parts that make the build process and board the ultimate DIY experience. Now, if building a board sounds like fun to you, but the process still seems daunting, we are proud to announce our new sessions called DIY Live, where we build a Demon 3.0 on live stream every couple of months, along with viewers who purchase the kit and sign up for the session. The live stream will be open to chat so that we can personally quickly answer your questions within minutes, and so that you can get your board up and running within the duration of the stream. We hope that DIY Live will bring new members into the DIY electric skateboard community. For more information on this event, make sure to check the link in the description below and our website for regular updates. Our YouTube channel and Propulsion Boards is made possible by viewers like you. Without you, none of this would have ever been possible, so we are eternally thankful for the support you have given us over the last 5 years. We are happy to announce our new line of Propulsion Boards merch, which goes a long way in supporting our growth. Another great way to support our growth is to become a part of our audience on Patreon. There is a link to both of these in the description below if anyone is interested. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel to see other DIY electric skateboard content and future generations of the Demon series electric skateboards. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video.